Welcome to The Latest Version. I'm your host, Betsy Bush. We're living longer, not just growing older, and we're pushing back against the expectations that we're finished at 50 or 60 or beyond. What do you still want to do? Is it follow artistic passions, start a business, or pivot to something completely unexpected? I'm talking to people who are sharing their insights and advice for others on the path to reinvention. So, what's your latest version? So, show of hands, please. How many of you are drowning in photos? That great shot you got of all of you on vacation that you want to include on your holiday card? Where is it? How many hours will it take you scrolling through your phone to find? And how about all those pictures you inherited from your parents and your grandparents? Managing our photographs, the stuff of memories, is becoming overwhelming. My guest, Cathi Nelson, has found herself at the nexus of what is becoming the new profession of photo management. It's also a great area for second actors looking for a home-based business. In 2009, Cathi founded the Photo Managers, the leading organization serving entrepreneurs through training, a professional certification program, and a code of ethics that sets high standards for the rapidly growing photo management industry. Cathi's been featured in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Real Simple Magazine, and the Wall Street Journal. She's also the author of Photo Organizing, Going from Overwhelmed to Overjoyed. Cathi, it is great to have you with us on The Latest Version.
I am thrilled to be here.
Great, great. I am so interested in what you're doing because to me, you're at the center of several different things. Ones all of us can relate to. People do feel overwhelmed by just the sheer numbers of photos they have in boxes and envelopes, the hard copies. And then, of course, there's the digital world that's taken over, right? Photos on phones, on hard drives, on laptops. And people really are needing help to figure out, first of all, how do I save? How do I secure all of these things so that I'll have them in the future and that my children and, for future generations will have them? So tell me how you got started and kind of give me an overview of what this whole photo management industry is.
Yeah, it's a great story in the sense that it's one of those examples of a business that there wasn't once a need for, but now it's an exploding need. And, I happened to, before digital photos, right, we would take our 24 rolls or 36 rolls down to our 1 hour photo lab and drop them off and wait, in the parking lot or whatever, right, for your chance to see your photos. And then you'd get your doubles and you'd bring them home and you'd flip through them, maybe put them in an album or put them in a drawer or a box until the next event happened. In 2009, so I spent many years helping people create scrapbook photo albums, which was really fun because I started that as I was an adopted parent and I wanted to create for my son what's called a life book. So he could see the photos and read I could read to him the story of how he joined our family. And I needed a scrapbook to do that. And so I spent many years actually teaching people how to make scrapbook photo albums. But by 2007, 2008, I noticed people were coming in with little baggies of memory cards because they were switching to digital and they were perceiving it still to be like a roll of film. And also they didn't know, how do I email this photo? How do I get these photos from this memory card onto my computer? And I kept noticing there was a growing frustration too. And many women, I think as women, we tend to think we're not smart with technology. So women in particular care so deeply for their photos, but felt like they were being held hostage by their husbands or somebody who knew better than they did where they were. So I started helping people. And a woman asked me, a good friend said, well, when I offered to come to her home, she said, well, what do you charge? And I was stunned by the question because I wasn't charging anything. It's typical. And she said, well, no, you can't, unless you let me pay you, I'm not letting you come to my house, a good friend. So finally we went back and forth and I agreed and I got to her home. And not only did she have the memory cards on her computer that she didn't know how to, that she wanted help with, but she also pulled out the boxes of photos she had inherited from her parents who had recently passed away. She was one of 4 siblings and she had promised them that she would, have those photos digitized and then, give them back to everybody so they have access to their childhood photos. Her kids were in middle school and high school, so they were living in the world between digital and analog photos. And she said, I don't care how long it takes, Cathi, but I guarantee there are hundreds of other Marias who pay somebody to do this for them. And there you go. In 2009, I thought, that's a great idea. I think I'll start a business doing that. And I did. And not long after that, people started seeing what I was doing and saying, I want to do that in my area. Could you teach me how to do that? And it's a long story to where we are today, but we now have, hundreds of members all over the world offering photo management and photo organizing services to clients. And I've created an organization, it's almost like a trade association that supports through training and certification and helps them have very successful businesses doing that.
It's funny. So many conversations I've had with previous guests, we kind of talk about the industries that have gone away. Most prominently, magazines and a lot of newspapers and journalism. But this is something that has appeared because of the digital world. And I think just that sense of, you don't have one or two photo albums that you can thumb through anymore. I mean, when I grew up, my family basically had one photo album. I mean, maybe that wasn't typical, but we weren't, gradually, there's just the pileup of things in boxes and those paper envelopes you'd bring back from Photo Hut or whatever. And it does, maybe you say, oh, one of these days I'm going to do it. And what if it never happens?
When we start with people, when people ask me about what we do, it's really important to connect people with the why this matters. It's really not about organizing. We call ourselves professional photo organizers. I would say organization is strictly a means to an end. Why do you take those photos? What is captured in those photos that you care so much about? And, I'll ask you, for instance, if you think about your own family photo collection, what is it? What makes you take a camera with you somewhere or use your phone, and why? What is it that you're hoping will happen when you take a photo?
Well, I think you all wait for that kind of special moment when you're all together and everyone's in sync, and certainly when your kids get older and are spending time away from home, those moments when you're all together are really special.
Mm-hmm. And so I love to say that we are a people of stories. And today, since the invention of the camera, the way that we used to tell stories around the campfire in different ways like that. But, with the invention of photography and film, certainly using video cameras and stuff, we started telling stories through photos. And, you look at social media and everything, right? It's in some ways, maybe we don't love all the stories that get told today with film, with photos, especially for young kids. But really, it is a way of telling a story. And so the heart of what we do is help people find the photos that matter the most to them and and then we help them tell the story that they want to tell for themselves, maybe to enjoy in the future or for the next generation. And that's really the heart of it, of what we do and why it's such meaningful work. When I first named my business myself, I chose the word organizing because Maria, actually what she wanted from those photos of her parents was an album of her parents' life together, because that was her end goal. And I thought, well, unless I organize, I have to organize those photos first to make an album, because I needed to create a narrative. I had to have a beginning, middle, and end. So that's why I tacked the word organizing on. And then I put on the word personal. I was a personal photo organizer, because it's really deep and meaningful personal work. When a person, and our members that do this for a living will tell you over and over again, it's such a privilege when a family gives you access to their photo collection. You become part of their family. You get to see the weddings and the celebrations and the vacations and all the things that happen in a family's life, which, believe it or not, aren't that unusual. We are all so much more alike than different in how we celebrate our lives together. And so it's really personal. We call it personal photo organizing. Now we say the word management because it's become much more complex with digital, but really that's the heart of what we do.
What advice do you have for people who are kind of, stuck with, literally boxes of the snapshots and things like that maybe come to them? I know someone who got a box of black and white snapshots from his parents' generation who, has no idea who they are. There's nothing written on the back. You kind of wonder, should I keep these? Is there some inherent value in them? What do you think?
Well, the first thing I'd say is you want to make sure that you don't do the same thing to the next generation behind you. So, because that's such a common experience. I tell a story. My great aunt, who I adored, or she wasn't my great aunt, she was 92, died just 2 years ago. And so everybody knows that I've been, helping people with photos for a living in my family. And she promised me, I'd ask her, Auntie Rose, are there any more photos in the family? No, you have every family photo there was. And sure enough, after she passed away, we went through her house. I now have in my basement boxes of beautiful black and white photos, of which I don't know who they are. So I was like, oh, you told me this wasn't going to happen. So I created an acronym called the ABCs of photo organizing that we use quite a bit. And I think gives people a quick visualization of what to do. So if you pull out those boxes of photos, one is you want to set a timer because you can only probably nostalgic overwhelms you, memories and things like that. If you know the people in the photos, so maybe an hour at a time. It's not a weekend project. You won't finish this in a weekend. And give yourself permission to take some time. But if you look at a group of photos, ask yourself, is this an A photo? That means, is it album worthy, archival worthy, whatever? That goes into the A pile. Is this a B photo? That means you can't really quite decide if it's A or not, which is quite a few of them because it's hard to make these decisions. You put that back in a box. Is it a C photo? C is, yes, you can throw photos away. So we recommend that you throw away at least 80% of your photo collection, and digital even, deleting. And what we mean by that is the blurries, the doubles, the scenery shots. If you went to the Grand Canyon and you took, 35 shots of the sunset, we really only need one of the sun, right?
Yes.
Not all 35.
That's right.
It's the people, because then you look, is it as an S? So ABCS, does it tell a story? And usually if there's people in that and that you want to tell that story, goes back in the A. Now, those B photos, I always joke, then put them in a box and put a note on the box that says, I couldn't bring myself to throw these photos away, but you have my permission to throw them away. Because honestly, that collection of black and white photos, you can donate them to some museums if there's historical information in there. Sometimes that's of interest, but most likely they are just what they are. And I think people really struggle with throwing away photos because they feel like they're throwing away a person and a memory, but really it is a piece of paper in a moment in time. And it can be more frustrating to have a big box of that in your house, not knowing who they are, than the relief you might feel with the permission that it's okay to throw them away.
Thank you. Thank you for granting permission, because I feel like a lot of people need that. It's okay to throw away a photograph that has no meaning to you or really anyone else alive that you can pass it on to.
And what's interesting with digital today is that people still see a digital photo as a photo, but really it's digital, it's information, it's data. It's not really a photo. We think of it as a photo, but we're much more willing to delete, screenshots and photos right off our phones and things like that. Hopefully, or if you're not, you need to, because then you're just really burying yourself in the future generation in digital data that's completely meaningless with no information at all. But then the other thing I always tell with the ABCs that people find very helpful is you don't have to organize your photos chronologically. Think about, I always say we live in time, date, order. Today's Friday, right? It'll be Saturday tomorrow. And but we remember thematically. So were there family themes? In fact, with your family, did you go on vacation to a certain place every year? Or did you have like family traditions around Christmas or 4th of July or Halloween, right? If you did, it's much more interesting to group your photos in terms of those family memories around themes or travel, and then they don't have to be in chronological order. It's more interesting to view things in terms of, look how cute Johnny was when he was 5, and now in the next page or the next photograph he's 50. I mean, it's much more interesting than it is to see 100 photos of Johnny going from 5 to 6 to 7 to 8. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. That's a great idea. Having an album of, your kids in their different Halloween costumes through the years. So you're jumping from year to year, but the thematic idea is an interesting one, and I think that would spark a lot of creativity there. Just thinking about themes as opposed to chronological order.
Can help you move from frozen to getting something done, because if you say to yourself, okay, I'm just going to pick one theme And if I just complete one album or one grouping of photos, even if it's just scanned and put onto, uploaded into a folder labeled and put on a flash drive for your kids, at least they have that, and maybe take the time to write out why you picked that theme. Whether if they're printed photos, you just write it out on an index card and include it in the index card. That's what we want, right? We want, if I could go back to my parents who are passed, or my mom's still alive, but my dad, but ask them, what was your favorite memory of growing up with us? Could you tell me what it was that you remember and why? I would love that.
So many people think about organizing photos until it's too late. And I think about the natural disasters we've seen recently with homes destroyed by fire or tornado. And I think of all the things that were lost, probably the photographs would be the most painful, or among the most painful. What should people be doing to save those memories, save the photos? What's the best thing?
We really recommend something called the 3-2-1 backup. But the first thing is you want to make sure your photos are backed up. So if you have your photos on your phone or your computer or whatever, you do want to use whether it's we recommend Backblaze or Carbonite or one of those type of that's just backing up your system without you realizing it. But the 3-2-1 backup is really, it's about redundancy, that you should have 3 copies of everything today. And what we mean by that is 1 copy in the cloud, 1 on an external hard drive that maybe is not in your possession. Maybe it's in a safe deposit box. And then a 3rd copy, which could be a physical copy, an album or something. With your printed photos, really digitizing them, getting them scanned is critical, because then it's terrible. It's a tragedy, right? And so many people don't get to that. But if if their photos were scanned and they burned in those fires, like just say in Colorado, at least, and they were backed up, they would have access to those photos. And that's, I know at some point you're asked about a career, but scanning people's photos is a wonderful second act career for so many people. And because so many people don't want to send them away to a stranger or to box them up. And if you enjoy the process of learning people's stories, and then it's a great additional revenue, it's just a great revenue stream, and it's meaningful work, and it doesn't take a high-tech skill set to do it.
Well, let's talk about the new profession, or this area of business now, that someone can become a photo organizer for other people. Tell me how that works.
Yeah, I mean, so many people have wonderful businesses doing that, and it's we have a little quiz, of questions to ask yourself. Do you like listening to people's stories? Do you enjoy meeting new people? Do you like history? Are you willing to learn new things? I have on my wall, everything is figure-outable. That's a good philosophy if you kind of can come into it with that philosophy, so maybe you've never scanned photos before. It's not that hard. Or maybe it might be hard to you, but you can figure it out. And what you're getting paid for to do is you're willing to figure it out. Other people aren't. And so that's why it's a great, you get well compensated for doing something that other people want to do, but they just don't have the time to do it. And so professional photo organizers have a myriad of different services that they offer clients. Everything from scanning photos and film and slides, all the way to digital asset management, basically, where they're going in remotely into a person's computer and reorganizing their folder collection, running deduplication software. And we do a tremendous amount of training on that. There's a lot of great products out there that the consumer isn't aware of, nor would they ever want to. The learning curve would be too high to learn how to use, a deduplication software if you're only going to deduplicate your own photos. But if you're doing multiple people's photos, it's worth learning the software. It's not that hard, and it's like magic to the client.
Wow.
So there's just so many different pieces of that people can do.
Can you think what type of person is drawn to this kind of profession, and I'm wondering if you have some things to pass along about who finds this an interesting sort of thing, who is attracted to this kind of business, who are the
so funny, but I'm going to pull up an email I got the other day from Ed about, so this is an example. I retired last year and was a wildlife biologist supervisor with our provincial government for 37 years. So he has done a lot of data-centric and metadata that doesn't scare me. And so he's does some ancestry work, and he was interested. I talked to he and his wife yesterday, and they are going to be joining as service. Another example is an interesting fellow that joined a few 6 months ago or so. He's a retired geophysicist in Houston. He was looking for something that was of interest part-time in retirement, and was deeply impacted by Hurricane Harvey that went through Houston and destroyed a lot of the photos, and not only his own family photos, but also in his neighborhood. And so he is building he actually built a truck, like a van with scanners in it, and is going to people's driveways and offering this as a service.
Wow. That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah, he is a great guy. But other than him, many times that people come from, like, it's crazy, the backgrounds, librarians and IT people, project management. It really is usually what the common denominator is. Maybe they were the family photo person. They are the one who always cared about the photos. Maybe made the calendars for family members, made sure that they did a Christmas photo card, maybe does the legacy, has really gotten into family genealogy work and finds that fascinating. Usually that's kind of a common denominator at some sort of people that are interested in doing the work. And then they figure out not everybody has that same interest and are willing to pay for somebody to do that.
Mm-hmm. Your organization has a certification program. You have best practices. You have a code of ethics. Tell me about the code of ethics.
That was very important. So when I first started and people started asking me if they could do this as well, this was in like 2009, right? Before computers were we weren't even using our iPhones for photos yet, really. But I decided to create a website where people could everybody called themselves personal photo organizers. And I got a phone call from somebody who said, your employee didn't deliver something the way that I wanted. And I was shocked that they thought she was my employee. So I went to see an attorney, and they said, no, you can't have everybody call themselves. That's like a franchise. You're creating a franchise. I was like, I don't want to do a franchise. And so that's when I came up with the model, more of an association trade. And I did a lot of research about associations and things. And I realized that if I was going to endorse people, we needed create a certification we've established now more and more the industry best standards, and also a code of ethics. So the code of ethics is about respecting people's privacy. You'd have to read through our code of ethics, but what you would want, because it's such personal work. So we require to be listed on our website now to be found. You go through certification, which is 5 to 6 we have 6 modules, training modules. You download their PDFs, which really aren't teaching you how to be a photo organizer. They're teaching you best practices. For instance, we recommend you scan at 600 DPI. That's a standard in the industry. We recommend that with copyright laws, if you come across a professional photographer's photos, you contact that professional photographer, or you try to find them up to a certain point before you scan. That's best practices. That you communicate directly with your client on all prices at all times. And so we have all of that. And then what they do is when they with their first real paid client, not a family friend, they document their processes through the entire, like, how did you invoice them? How did you stay in touch? And we're doing that because we know if they follow the steps that we recommend, it'll be a much better experience for everybody. And then they have to document that, submit it to us. Then we check their references. We call and contact the client, make sure that they did, the client was happy with the work they did. They interview with me, and then they're officially certified and listed on our website. So in 12 years, that was the one and only complaint I've ever gotten. Now, could it come again? Of course, but we really stress that importance of that, because we are setting an industry that didn't exist, and it's really critical, I think, that we have the highest standards of excellence that we expect we encourage people to respond from. Nobody reports to me. You are an independent entrepreneur. I get no reports of what people's sales are. I have nothing. I don't get into that at all. But we're a wonderful community. So
this is very impressive. I mean, to have gone from, let me scan your photographs, to a few years later developing this framework for an entirely new way that people can earn a living. And help people out. It's very impressive. And you also,
Well, when I lay my head down, what I'm most proud of, honestly, is that I've created job. I get so many wonderful letters from members, and we've had members now, been members for over 10 years. We're having our 10th annual educational conference. So we've been at this a while. That I've created a vision for a profession that's been really meaningful for them. And I think that, to me, brings me great joy, that it's, that we really have, I feel a lot of pride in that. That makes me feel happy.
What sort of things are covered at a typical conference? And you have one coming up in a couple of months, is that right?
Yeah. So I'm proud to say we will always do both an in-person and virtual conference. We know how to do that now. But a conference is everything from, so it's really the education comes from we call it an educational conference. So our members submit to speak, and they know, like, one of the topics this year, a lot of people are, how do I create a good quality contract with a client? And so one of our members is an attorney. She was a contract attorney. So she has great contracts. She's going to actually teach a breakout on how to create a really good contract. And then we also topics of, like, how do you break down a large, project with multiple pieces, maybe memorabilia, letters, artwork, all sorts of things. So here's a breakout on how a person, documents that process, prices it. That would be an example of a breakout. So we have over 20 breakouts that people choose to attend, to participate in. And then we just have a great time together. We have a lot of meals together, and people just love getting to know one another. And many great friendships have been formed through the conferences. So
do you also have members who deal with historical documents, letters, autographs, maps?
It's not just photos. We use photos, but we have personal historians, we have genealogists, we have people who only deal in film and video. It's really all about stories. We've kept the word photo in it because that's how we started, but we really are pretty all-encompassing at this point. And the other thing is, we recommend that people think of themselves as general contractors. So and that you outsource what you can't do. So if we have members who, like, maybe they do come across a client who wants a more of a personal historical, document created for them, then they would go on our website, find a member, and then they would outsource that work to that member who's an expert in that. Or not all our members do genealogy, but we have other members that they can't. So it's becoming a much more diverse population of people that offer services in all these different areas.
So you have about 650 members, right? Mm-hmm. But you have international members as well. And I think about looking at your website, there was about 500 in the United States.
Yeah, I'd say that's about, you did a good job. Yeah, we're probably, 80% U.S., but we're really focused this year on growing a little bit more internationally. They're so connected to one another. Our UK group, our Australian group, they do monthly Zoom calls with each other that we set up for them. And we have a small group in Brazil, which should be a huge market because it's a big population. We have 3 members right now in Brazil.
Well, it seems to me if there are 500 in the United States and we have a population of over 300 million, it seems to me that that's an area where there's a lot of growth possibilities, right?
The growth is endless, because you can only handle so many clients at a time. So the average member could probably handle, if you're part-time, you want maybe 1 or 2 clients. So my son, for instance, from a scanning perspective, he and his girlfriend are both educators or teachers. They don't make much money. They work with adults with special needs. They do the scanning at home. Joshua's taught Kate how to scan. He learned from me when he was younger. And they have my scanners, and they earn, I think, between $1,000 to $1,500, maybe $2,000 a month, doing 1, maybe 2 jobs a month.
Nice.
And they have a waiting list of people who want them to do their work for them, and so that works for them. So there's way more business than there are. I don't know if we'll ever have too many photo organizers. I don't think so.
That is amazing. I don't know if there's any field I've ever heard of where there is just so much room for growth that I hope my listeners can visit your website and say, this is something that appeals to me. It sounds like like there's a lot of room for growth and that there's a lot of possibilities for people who want to DIY this. Can you give us 3 pieces of advice for people who are going to say, I'm going to tackle this myself?
we have a great advice from the pros Facebook page. If you want a photo organizing advice from the pros, it's free. And we answer people's questions all the time in there. That's a little tip if you want some free advice when you get stuck. But I think if you're going to DIY it yourself, and let me speak to the analog photos first, the printed photos, is we recommend is one is you set a goal. You have to have a reason to keep you going when you get frustrated, or maybe you think not. And to break, there's a saying, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And I think that's true. So a little bit based on what I said, what if you could wave a magic wand over your photos, what would the end project look like? And if you can get really clear on what you want and write that down, set a goal, this is what I want. That's a good starting place. And then from there, the second point would be is we call it the hunt and gather stage. You really need to gather everything into one place to assess the mess, we call it. So set up a separate, table in your living room, even if it's a card table, and go on this hunt. And this is now, again, this is not a weekend project. And so give yourself 6 months or a year. If you're like the average family, which has 5,000 to 7,000 photos easily, you're going to have to go find them. So get all the albums onto the table, all the framed photographs that you have, the photos tucked away in boxes in the drawers in the attic. Maybe ask family members if they have things that you might want, and then document what you have. We have 5 blue albums and what years they are. Don't go down memory lane. Don't look at the photos yet, because you'll feel overwhelmed if you start. The minute you open that box and you start, it would be the same for me. If I opened up my family box of photos of my kids when they were little, in an hour would pass before I'd get through 6 or 7 photos, just because I'd go down memory lane, right? So you don't do that yet. You have plenty of time to do that part, but you want to get an idea. And then the average number of photos, 1 inch equals about 200 photos, or 600 photos fit in a shoebox. So start counting. How many photos do you really have? So you have an idea of what you have.
Wow. 600 photos in a shoebox.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
So that's why people really grossly underestimate how many photos they have. They'll say, oh, I think I have a couple thousand. And we all know, probably not, because we know what the average family has. And then you look at your photos and you realize, that's a lot of shoeboxes, I think, in that over there. And then from this, I guess the third advice would be, based on that goal, then are you going to digitize those? Then it would be to actually use those ABCs and to really curate the photo collection so that you're really caring for the photos that you care the most about. And so those would be my 3 top ways to get started.
And don't be afraid to throw things out when
that's part of the curation, right? So even that 80-20 rule, if you can give yourself permission when you look at that huge, say you find out I have 7,000 or 10, let's say 10, okay, I'm going to end up with 2,000 by the time I'm done. If you can really believe in that, you'll feel better. You will feel a huge sense of relief if suddenly you're looking at 4 or 5 albums, or 1 box really nicely labeled and easily accessible and shareable. You're going to be so happy. I promise.
That's great. And if anybody needs some more help, they can look at your book, right? Photo Organizing, Going from Overwhelmed to Overjoyed by Cathi Nelson, Cathi Nelson. And I encourage anyone who is really interested in photo management as a side hustle or a full-time post-career sort of thing, please go to thephotomanagers.com and look for information on becoming a photo manager. And Cathi, this has been an incredibly fun, useful, news you can use sort of podcast edition, and I really, really appreciate your being with me on the latest version today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So, dear listener, I would love to know what you thought of this episode. Are you going to try some of Cathy's organizing ideas? Or maybe you want to start a new photo management business? Let me know by emailing me at betsy@thelatestversionpodcast.com. And did you hear? The podcast is moving to every 2 weeks, but you can sign up on our website, thelatestversionpodcast.com, for our in-between episodes newsletter, Checking In, because, we want to check in with you. You can listen to episodes on the website and read more about me and my guests. If you're listening to this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and give us a thumbs up. It really helps the show. I'm Betsy Bush, and this is my latest version.